After waiting for some time, we finally got our hands on the new LG C1. This is LG's mid-range OLED in the US and one of their most popular models throughout the years. Today, we'll see how it stacks up to last year's C10 and if it can continue to carry the torch forward. Hi, I'm Brandon, a test developer at Ratings.com, where we help you find the best products for your needs. First, we'll look at the design of the TV, and then we'll move on to the smart features. Then, we'll look at the picture quality, motion handling, inputs, and sound quality. Afterwards, we'll finish with our verdict and compare it to other competing models on the market. Also, stick around as we'll be answering some of your questions in a short Q&A at the end. We bought the 55-inch model to test, but it's also available in 48, 65, and 77 inches. An 83-inch model is expected to be released at a later date. We expect all of these sizes to perform similarly. If you'd like to skip straight to our test results, then see the links in the description below or use the YouTube chapters feature. First, let's start off with the design. In simple words, not much has changed since 2020's LG C10. The C1 looks like a premium TV with thin borders all around. It even has the same sleek-looking stand as previous years, but the TV sits a bit close to the table. So if you put a soundbar in front, it might block the screen. Speaking about its stand, it's a mix of metal and plastic. There's a plastic cover on the rear stand, and you can route cables throughout it for cable management. This keeps your setup tidy, but you won't be able to use this if you wall mount it, which you can thanks to the VESA mount. The back of the TV has a simple but modern look to it. The housing for the OLED panel is metal and extremely thin. The housing for the electronics sticks out a bit, and it's made of plastic. Overall, the LG C1 has fantastic build quality. The mix of metal and plastic gives a premium feel, and it's really solid throughout. The back panel, where the inputs are, bends a bit because of its plastic, but this shouldn't be an issue for most people. The stand is also very solid, and there isn't much wobble. Overall, you get what you pay for in terms of a premium TV, and LG doesn't cut any corners. To learn more about the inputs, stick around for the input section later in the video. Before we get into looking at this TV in detail, let's look at the smart features. LG released an updated version of their WebOS smart system. This version 6.0 is redesigned from version 5.0 found on the 2020 models. Instead of getting LG's regular dashboard that pops up as a banner at the bottom, there's now a full homepage. It looks pretty simple and it's easy to use. The App Store offers a bunch of apps that you can download. Sadly, like most TVs in 2021, there are ads in the App Store and the homepage. You can't opt out of them without using a third-party software. There's even a shop store just for products that they have ads on. Now let's look at the remote. LG released a new look to their famous Magic Remote. Instead of the curved shape from the past years, it now sits flat. But don't worry, it still has the same functionality, and you can access the Magic Remote feature. This allows you to use the remote as a point and press, kind of like a computer mouse. There are quick access buttons to popular streaming apps at the bottom, and there's even both Google Assistant and Alexa voice features. This allows you to change inputs, search for content, or ask the weather, but you can't ask it to change settings. Open YouTube. Open Amazon Prime Video. It also has an NFC feature that allows you to tap your phone against the remote and cast content to the TV. Now let's take a look at the picture quality, starting with contrast. Contrast ratio is the difference between the whitest white and the darkest black, and is one of the most important aspects of picture quality. OLEDs are able to turn individual pixels completely off, which means they can display perfect blacks, creating a near infinite contrast ratio. This is fantastic, as it gives the image a lot of depth. It's especially good if you watch in dark rooms, as the inky deep blacks won't look gray like with some other LCD TVs. We recently started publishing local dimming videos with real scene content in our latest TV reviews. This is a good way to see how the TV performs with dark content in a dark room, and you can see the results on our website. Of course, this TV doesn't use local dimming since each pixel acts as its own individual zone. Still, the video is a good way to show the advantages of an OLED compared to other LCDs. Now, moving on to SDR brightness. This measures how bright a TV gets with SDR content and is important if you usually watch TV in a bright environment. The C1's peak brightness in SDR is adequate, although we measured slightly less brightness than last year's model. We got around 300 nits in our real scene test, with window sizes ranging anywhere from 415 to 130 nits. This wide range of luminance levels shouldn't be too surprising though, as OLEDs are known for having somewhat aggressive auto brightness limiters. Although in practice, the aggressive ABL won't be too noticeable, as most content doesn't have full white screens. Originally, we had lower measurements, but since firmware update 3.11.15, we've gotten brighter results. Keep in mind, we measured SDR peak brightness after calibration, while in the expert dark space picture mode, with color depth set to warm 50, peak brightness set to high, and OLED pixel brightness set to max. Even before calibration, measured brightness was about the same. It's possible to get a brighter measurement, but this comes at the cost of picture accuracy. With the TV set to vivid mode and all the other sliders cranked to max, we were able to get 489 nits in a 10% window. Overall, this TV gets bright enough for a room with a few lights, but we don't suggest placing it opposite of a window. Thankfully, it has superb reflection handling, which should help in these situations. For this year, LG also released the G1, which uses a new EVO OLED panel. It's advertised to be brighter than previous year's models, but we can't say by how much until we get it in. If you do have a room with a few lights and you're worried about glare, you should be happy to know that the reflection handling is fantastic. It has a glossy finish that does a really good job at reducing the reflected light, so glare shouldn't be an issue for most rooms, unless you have really bright lights directly on it. Now let's have a look at the HDR brightness. This is important if you tend to watch content in HDR and want highlights that really pop. The TV gets much brighter than an SDR, although it's still not as high as what LCD TVs can offer. We measured a real scene highlight of about 628 nits. Small highlights, like the 2% and 10% windows, are really bright, but the larger the highlight, the more dim it gets. This is because of the ABL. Once again, we measured overall lower brightness than compared to the C10, but in game mode, our C1 measured slightly brighter than our C10, but these differences would be hard to notice. Now let's check out the gray uniformity. This shows how evenly the TV displays solid colors across the screen. It's important if you plan on using it as a monitor, but can also be important for watching sports. As with most OLEDs, the gray uniformity is excellent. There's very little dirty screen effect, but it's hard to see. Near black uniformity is also quite great, better than last year's model. Like with other OLEDs, there are some tiny horizontal and vertical lines. However, it's hard to tell and shouldn't be noticeable with most content. As for true black uniformity, it's perfect, since each pixel is turned off and there's no backlight layer. Keep in mind that uniformity can change between units, but OLEDs tend to excel in this area. If you have an open seating area, it's important to get a TV with wide viewing angles. OLEDs are a fantastic choice for this, and this TV is no exception. The image remains really accurate, even when looking at it from the widest angles, so it's a great choice for watching shows or sports with some family and friends. Now let's look at the color accuracy. Before any sort of calibration, the accuracy in our unit was quite bad. Keep in mind that this can vary between units, so it's possible we got unlucky with the panel we purchased. The white balance and color accuracy are noticeably off, and if you experience the same thing, you may want to calibrate it. Of course, after calibration, everything looks great. You can see our recommended TV settings here, but this may not work for each unit due to variance. Hey, Brandon from the future here. We received a lot of feedback concerning our pre-calibration measurements, so we took a deeper dive into it. When we originally measured color accuracy, we had peak brightness set to high, as we didn't expect this setting to affect the color accuracy, and it's a setting we believe many users will enable. Although as some of you pointed out, leaving the setting on can negatively affect the SDR color accuracy. Because of your feedback, we remeasured color accuracy with peak brightness disabled, and you can see the results on screen now. For the most part, the color temperature and white balance remain nearly the same, but we did get a much lower color DE, although the mapping is still not perfect. I should note we retested color accuracy on the latest firmware, 3.11.15, which is a different version than what we originally tested with. But it's hard to say if that has any effects on our results. For the time being, we're going to keep our published results as is, since we still expect most people to enable peak brightness. If the behavior of the peak brightness setting changes in the future firmware update, we'll be sure to test it out. Lastly, thank you to Keep It Classy Tech, in particular, for bringing this to our attention. Your feedback and testing is much appreciated. On to the color gamut, which is the range of colors a TV can display. There isn't much new here, as OLEDs have performed mostly the same in this regard for a while. The C1 has a really wide gamut, covering virtually all of the P3 color space, so it can produce the vivid colors and hues needed for HDR. However, Because of the bad color accuracy, it doesn't map the colors very well, so they can appear to be inaccurate. The color volume is decent. It displays dark colors perfectly, but struggles with really bright tones. But this is normal for an OLED. If you watch HDR content, the TV's gradient handling is also important. This is how well it displays shades of the same color. If a TV has bad gradient handling and tries to display something like a sunset, you'll notice banding between shades. Luckily, that's not the case here, as it has impressive gradient handling. It looks great overall, but you may notice some banding with darker grays and greens. You can also enable smooth gradation to further improve gradient handling, but it runs the risk of losing fine details. Before moving on to motion handling, it's important to note that this is an OLED display, and there's a risk of permanent burn-in if displaying static content for long periods of time. This could especially be a problem if you use your OLED as a PC monitor because there are so many static elements in the interface. OLED pixels use an organic compound to emit light, which degrades with usage. You can see our video here for an investigation into this issue. However, we don't expect this to be a problem with how most people use their TVs. By the way, before we speak about motion, if you enjoy our content, please make sure you subscribe to our channel for the latest videos and check out our website for the full review and more. By subscribing, you're helping us reach a wider audience and in turn, helping you find the best products for your needs. Also, visit the product deal page on our website, linked below. You'll find all available sizes from our affiliates presented in a convenient way. Now, let's look at the motion performance, starting with response time. Response time is how long it takes for a pixel to change from one color to the next. Slow response times can make moving objects appear blurry or smeary, known as ghosting. Like any OLED, the response time is near instant, so there's virtually no ghosting artifacts. This makes the TV a great choice for gaming or watching sports. If you find that the motion still looks a bit blurry, there's a way to reduce the perceived motion blur. The TV achieves this by inserting black frames in between each frame, and it's called black frame insertion. You can learn more about how it works here. LG calls this feature OLED Motion Pro, and it can be set to either 60 or 120 Hz, so it can change depending on the content. However, you can't use it in PC mode or if the TV is in the game optimizer mode with the prevent input delay set to boost. Keep in mind, BFI lowers screen brightness, which will negatively affect HDR content. Also, it can cause eye fatigue or headaches, so it's not for everyone. Since this TV has such a quick response time, lower frame rate content, like in movies, may appear to stutter because each frame is held on longer. If that bothers you, there's a way to try to fix it. The C1 has a motion interpolation feature that can interpolate low frame rate content up to 120 FPS. We found it works quite well with only mild artifacting. However, it may not be for everyone, as the increase in smoothness creates what's known as a soap opera effect. And you can learn more about how that works here. To enable motion interpolation, first turn on the true motion in the settings and adjust the de-jitter and de-blur sliders. Gamers should be happy to know this TV has all of the VRR features we've seen on past LG TVs. It supports FreeSync and HDMI 4 in VRR, and it's also G-Sync compatible. All three forms of VRR work properly, and there aren't any issues with them. If you had an HDMI 2.1 source, the VRR works as low as 20 Hz, and if it's an HDMI 2.0 source, it works at 40 Hz and above. Also important for gaming is the input lag. Like most LG TVs, it has very low input lag, so games will feel smooth and responsive. LG continues to lead the pack in this regard with some of the fastest input lag on a TV we've measured. New to the C1 this year is a prevent input delay setting in the game optimizer menu. If you set it to boost, it actually reduces input lag by about 3 milliseconds for the 60 Hz content. This happens because the TV sends a 120 Hz signal, which decreases the delay, but it doesn't make a difference with 120 Hz content. You don't even need to change the setting, because it's on by default when enabling the game optimizer settings. Luckily, this TV supports most common resolutions up to 4K at 120 Hz. It doesn't support 1440p at 60 Hz natively, but it works through a forced resolution. If you want to use it as a PC monitor, it supports proper Chroma 444, which is important for reading clear text. You just need to set the label of the input you're using to PC. Go to Inputs, Home Dashboard, Edit, Edit Inputs, PC, save, and back to our home. Now we're in PC mode. With our recent TestBench 1.6 update, we've added a new advanced console compatibility box to test with the new PS5 and Xbox Series X. This TV supports any resolution from either console, including 4K at 120Hz in HDR. However, we noticed that Dolby Vision doesn't work from the Xbox Series X with FreeSync enabled, but it works with HDMI 4 in VRR and G-Sync. Now let's check out the inputs. The C1 has a good selection of inputs. There are 4 HDMI inputs, which all support HDMI 2.1. Technically, they don't support the full HDMI 2.1 bandwidth of 48 gigabits per second and can only do up to 40 gigabits per second. Although this isn't really an issue, as it can still display 4K at 120Hz content in 10-bit HDR with Chroma 444. So there's not very many cases where you'll need more bandwidth than that. There are also 3 USB inputs, an Ethernet port, a TV tuner, an analog audio out, and a digital audio out. This TV also has eARC support with HDMI 2, which allows you to pass audio from your TV to a receiver. Now let's quickly talk about the built-in speakers. In terms of performance, it's actually slightly worse than last year's C10 because the C1 can't produce as much bass. It has a well-balanced sound profile and gets loud, but there's some distortion and compression at its max volume. However, this depends on the content and not everyone may hear it. Still, if you want a better audio experience, go for a speaker system or soundbar. Overall, the C1 is an amazing TV, which is what we've come to expect from LG's OLED TVs over the years. It's excellent for gaming because of its 4 HDMI 2.1 ports, VRR support, low input lag, and quick response time. If you're going to use it to watch movies in dark rooms, it's an exceptional choice thanks to the near infinite contrast ratio. However, it's not a huge step up over the C10. If you already have the C10, it's not worth the upgrade, but if you're looking to buy a high-end OLED, you should definitely be pleased with it. So far, we've reviewed 2 OLEDs this year, being the LG C1 and the Sony A90J. From LG, there's also the A1, the B1, and the G1, and Sony also has the A80J. It's hard for us to give an exact comparison at the moment since we haven't reviewed those models. Although in the past years, the C model from LG has always been a solid choice and one that people gravitate towards. We do expect the G1 to have higher brightness thanks to its new EVO panel, with everything else remaining mostly the same. The Sony A90J also uses the new EVO panel, and you can see from our measurements a tangible improvement in brightness. However, the LG currently has more gaming features and is considerably cheaper, so it's likely the better pick for most people. We'll make sure to keep our website and comparisons up to date as we buy and test more TVs. If you want an LCD that offers much higher brightness with no risk of burn-in, the Samsung QN90A is a solid choice. That said, the C1 delivers better picture quality for dark rooms, better gaming performance and features, and wider viewing angles. Choosing one over the other really comes down to personal preference and how you'll be using it. Now let's do a quick Q&A to end it out. Let's start off with Anthony Scott's question. Is the C1 that much better than the C10 that it's worth a price increase if you can get the C10 for about $300 cheaper? Well, given the price difference of $300 US, the C10 is likely the better deal for most people. The 2 TVs perform the same in many areas and offer many of the same features. Of course, as time goes on, the C10 will be phased out and will be harder to find, in which case the C1 is still a solid choice. And that will likely see a price drop near Black Friday. Here's one from Kane Robot. Any idea why multiple other reviewers that are generally fairly reliable think the C1 is a bit brighter than the C10 instead of darker? Is there something that can be just chalked up to the panel lottery? This is a good question, and something that stood out to us as well. Currently, we don't have any evidence to suggest why this is, and we hypothesize it could be due to panel variance. Here's a question from Kay Bao from Instagram. In real play, is there differences in gaming, VRR range, and input lag noticeable between the C1 and C10? The C1 does have marginally faster input lag than the C10. However, while this difference may be measurable, it's very unlikely to be perceivable. So for input lag, it's basically the same experience. As for VRR, the C1 is able to go all the way down to under 20 Hz, whereas the C10 can only go down to 40 Hz. In certain games, such as ones that run at 30 FPS, having this extended VRR range on the C1 will result in a smoother gameplay experience. Lastly, we get a lot of questions along the lines of, when will XTV be reviewed? We generally try to buy and review TVs as fast as possible. If you'd like to know more about what TVs we are reviewing and when they'll be finished, check out our suggestion tool linked below. Here, you can see where each TV is in the review process and also vote for TVs that you'd like us to review in the future. So that's it. What do you think of the LG C1? Is this TV going to be on your must-buy list? Let us know below. Also, we're a growing company and are expanding into other product categories. As a result, we are currently hiring in our offices in Montreal for various positions. So if you want to help people find the best product for their needs, have a look at our careers page on our website. You can check out all of the measurements on our website. If you like this video, please subscribe to our channel. You can also become an insider on the website for early access to our latest results. So that's it. Thanks for watching and see you next time.